Thank you for your patience with me as the release of the podcast was delayed a week due to some circumstances that occurred in my house that I will share with you and give you some insight of how this unfortunate circumstance has acted as a progress of growth and my own personal experience. And I would invite you to relate it to your own experiences, particularly whatever it is in your journey, in your life, in your healing, in your desires to maybe get a promotion, to heal from a certain ailment, to increase abundance in your life, to increase the harmony in your relationships, to increase the happiness and well-being and all of that in your life, whatever it is. I invite you to kind of use my story today that I'll share as kind of a way to kind of measure out how things are in your life in a way that I'll share with you how I've done that in mine. This is the Subconscious Healer podcast. I'm Dr. Gabe Roberts. Thank you for joining me today. As again, I mentioned that we were delayed 1 week out, but we should be right back on course now, right on schedule. The thing I want to point out about this work of subconscious healing, of what I would call psychosomatic medicine, is not the work that I absolutely chose. It's not the work that I ever imagined myself consciously doing in the beginning when I went through chiropractic college and studied various energy healing methods and earned a diplomate in nutrition as well as being certified in functional medicine under Functional Medicine University. This is not the work that I ever thought that I would be doing, and the reason why is this work is what chose me. So I didn't choose it; it chose me. And unbeknownst to my understanding, it all started when I had the privilege of being born in 1979 in Wagner, Oklahoma, in a house filled with complete mayhem. That was chaos, physical, emotional abuse, parents that were both highly addicted to alcohol, and including a very, very alcoholic father and a even more alcoholic stepfather. And this kind of prepped me for what I've done through the years, as far as not only becoming an addict myself, but journeying into the Marine Corps, getting away from all the drugs, but finding a new way of turmoil and mayhem, and eventually deciding that I wanted to do something else and I wanted to have peace and I wanted to have calm. I wanted to have harmony within myself. And although I didn't even know what that meant, it was a craving. It was a craving that I had started to become aware of. And in this journey to find answers for that craving, of course, I started to study the healing sciences, the health sciences, and that led to me. First, I was an emergency medical technician, paramedic student, driving around the back of ambulances and working again in chaotic and mayhem situations, um, without even having any idea that the internal world within me was what resonated with that external chaos that paramedics and first responders are oftentimes putting themselves into on a regular basis. So, if you know any paramedics, if you know any police officers, there's a reason they do that work, and it's oftentimes outside of their awareness, below their threshold of why they do it. There's something that matches them, and they may feel like, well, I do it because it feels good to help others, and that's a noble trait, right? That's a good cause. But something inside of them seeks out what's familiar. That's what happens with all of us. Whenever it's relationships, whenever it's chronic illness, whenever it's misery, poverty, whatever it might be, I promise you it has to do with something deep inside between the years of 0 to 5, conception and 5, of when we learn the most, when we develop our most powerful and influential measuring memories that again begin to evaluate and screen every experience that we have after that, seeking out what was there first, not what's comfortable, not what's good, what was there first? And that's oftentimes um, the physical result that shows up in our life, in our relationships, in our health, in our areas of happiness, and our emotional states, as well as our material wealth, as well as what we have as far as the physical things in our life. So me having the privilege of this, starting to see that there was an internal chaos in me, having the cravings of looking for what it is to do to start to have harmony within myself is what started me on this journey. And as I go through this, I studied every single method that I could possibly get my hands on, from high level hypnosis to EMI, EMDR, Psych K, quantum integration, bioenergetic synchronization technique level one, two, and three, as well as of various other acupuncture modalities and methods, and using every herb you could think of, an adaptogen that was possibly supportive for adrenal work. I've used it, tried it, done that. To Ganoderma, a mushroom also called reishi, very calming to the nervous system. Not in my case, though. It provided um, short-term relief to only soon find myself right back into that internal mayhem once the supplement wore off. And in my opinion, if this is something that you're noticing in your own life, it is just symptom level treating. It's not getting to the root cause, and that might be completely conflicted with what the professional is telling you. Medical doctors, for example, won't ever talk about root causes. They don't even, that word doesn't even exist on their radar, but they will try to eliminate symptoms. And if you're eliminating symptoms, the root cause still continues to linger, fester, grow with life experiences, to proliferate, and will tend to continue to do whatever it needs to do to get your attention, because something down there needs resolution. Something down there needs your specific individual attention. And oftentimes, what this means is there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken, but there's a perception inside of you that doesn't know that overwhelming event you experienced, perhaps 0 to 5, maybe later in life, but oftentimes 0 to 5 are where 98% of people's originate from. That part of you, when you first had an experience, doesn't know that that event is over. So that part of you triggers your alarm system on a regular basis. It stimulates your reticular activating system, which is kind of that controls the jurisdiction of the radar that your conscious mind has. So whatever trips your reticular activating system, which is a it's a spot in the brain that triggers what you pay close attention to, um, is governed by your emotional state and your body feelings. When something comes up, when you have a trigger, when an environmental exposure or somebody says something, um, and I'll share with you a couple triggers my own here shortly. Whenever something like that happens, it triggers something in your body, and your reticular activating system it immediately shifts its filters, almost equivalent to changing sunglass lens colors. If you're wearing sunglasses on your eyes and they are red lenses, and you're only seeing things through a hint of red with a hue of red, and you shift those out and you put blue lenses in, you're only going to see things blue. You're only going to see things with a hint of blue. Well, anytime you have an emotional shift or get triggered, your reticular activating system within your brain goes through a similar shift where it goes from red lenses to blue lenses. I'm using this metaphorically, but you kind of get the idea. Whenever you get triggered, you suddenly are paying attention to an entirely different external world because the internal world has suddenly shifted. And when this happens, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is the hub of your nervous system's stress response, it goes active too. So it immediately your alarm system in your body goes off, starts sounding off, and your immune system changes, your blood vessels completely shift, how your all even everything from your pupils dilating suddenly to your digestive processes being shortened and basically um, censored, turned off because of uh, the sudden shift. Now, this happens to people all the time, and it's no real secret. But the problem is, whenever we have perceptions within us stored within our holographic energetic field of our neurology, and things trigger these act and activate this system on a regular basis, which can happen, by the way, 15 to 50 times an hour in your average everyday person who's at a level one conscious awareness. um, it can become very detrimental to the nervous system over time. And what I mean by level one consciousness is somebody who's not aware of the internal self, somebody who's not aware that their thoughts have any power, somebody who's completely at the mercy of the external environment, somebody that says, she really upset me and my mother-in-law really bothers me, and this election is really stressing me out. That is a person at the mercy of the external environment and putting their emotional attention on the wrong things and basically hijacking all the internal congruity within their nervous system. And, when you do this enough times, it's going to be a matter of time before your body begins to have some kind of effect spilling over into some sort of pathology. And again, if you're at a level one consciousness, you'll go into a level one medical doctor who's going to say, well, yeah, something's wrong. Here's your solution. Let's cover those symptoms up. Okay. And again, that's equivalent of trying to, uh, that's equivalent to almost having a submarine with some kind of screen door that you're trying to use to keep the water out. It's just a matter of time before um, that submarine just kind of goes to its detriment. And it's a sad truth. It's unfortunate, but it's just the real world that we live in, and we need to be aware of that if we're going to transcend, if we're going to change, if we're going to uh, go up into higher levels of consciousness, leaving level one and going to two, figuring out three, and then eventually level four, where level four is where you see external changes happening in your physical environment, relationships, happiness, health, wealth, and they're from internal changes. Okay. So again, this work is not what I chose. It's what chose me. And it all started with that earliest experience in life. And it led me to seeking out, studying the most effective methods I could put my hands on to changing. So what happened was I was a level one person for most of my life, a level one consciousness. And even through all my training in chiropractic college, and the when I went through chiropractic school, I will promise you, if you contact Cleveland University in Kansas City and any professor that was there when I was there, if you contact them and ask them about Gabe Roberts, they will remember my name. They'll remember that I was dedicated to what I was doing. I was in class, the first one there, the last one to leave, always asking questions, always paying attention. When it came to the board reviews, getting board for licensure, there was a group of doctors that came in that kind of speed up the learning and teach us what I would say was equivalent to a couple of years worth of education. We learned actually a couple of years of knowledge. Let me correct myself. Not education, but knowledge. A couple of years of repeating what you learned, but not really learning how to work on the inside, which is the definition of education. Education means a doku, from to draw out from within. Now, that's a lot different than from just gathering information, which is what we do in these brick and mortar situations. So even the people that were teaching the board reviews, so these students, chiropractic students, could obtain licensure when they were reviewing 2 years plus of knowledge in a few weeks' time. They got to know me very well. I was notorious for wearing Batman paraphernalia, a Batman shirt. And I remember at one point one of the instructors said, "Batman knows the answer. Batman's got this," because they would go through and they would put all this stuff together and they would ask questions and they would ask questions. And it was all to cue what you had already learned before to prepare for these very strenuous tests that were coming up, board exams. So they knew me. They knew that I knew the information very well. I knew the information very well. And not one hint of what I'm describing to you was ever mentioned in all of this years of gathering knowledge. Not one hint of the subconscious mind and really what it is was ever mentioned. And the amount of nervous system training that chiropractors get is immense, oftentimes on par, if not sometimes even more so than what the medical doctors are getting trained with. And yet we're told the subconscious mind is a unconscious mind is part of you that just regulates your hormones, regulates your nervous system, regulates your blood vessels whenever things happen, and all the extensive of you're either in a fasting state or you're in an eating state. You're either eating food and digesting or you're fasting. And, we touched on fight or flight, but not to the extent that it should be, not to the extent that is overlooked, not to the extent that, like I just mentioned to you moments ago, how it leads to the detriment and the spillover in pathology when a person is constantly triggered. Even in all that knowledge gathering over 8 years worth of school, 4 years worth of advanced teaching, but 4 years of pre-work, was any of this mentioned. So that's why some of this may be new to you, some of this may not be new. So my point is that going through all of this, learning all the knowledge, being a standout student, and learning as much as I could did not get me one step closer into solving this internal chaos, into solving this internal mayhem. Despite all the things I learned and all the things that I studied after becoming a chiropractor and having a degree, um, that's where I started. That's the whole point of me discussing that, was because going through knowing all the information I learned and even having the board members recognize me and know that I knew my stuff, I was still a level one conscious awareness through all that time. And that means that I was letting the external environment rule what I thought. The external environment was all I knew. Um, I never knew that there was an internal world beyond what their teachings provided. And this internal world was, in fact, the subconscious mind that goes beyond regulating our digestion, that goes beyond regulating our nervous system, but is more or less um, connected to the web of reality itself. And what I mean by that is our nervous system is the most sophisticated electrical system on the planet, hands down. And electrical systems that are very complex, like our brain and our spinal cord. Whenever I teach people what's called holographic deletion, which is pointed out in my book, From Pain to Purpose, a complete guide on how to reverse post-traumatic stress disorder, um, I teach people about these holographic subliminal imprints that are inside of our toroid field, the field that our heart generates that's 3 to 8 feet outside of our body, measurable with instruments now, often called the aura, often called energetic web, but it's now measurable with instruments, so we know it's there. That extends outside of our body, and the front of that field, the frontal area that our body is facing towards, acts like a holographic dashboard. If you want to know how it works, if I say, think of a bicycle, think of a red balloon, think of an orange drinking cup, think of a cooler, think of a piece of pie, think of a piece of pumpkin pie, one with whipped cream, one without whipped cream. Think of a battle tank, a tank you'd see on the battlefield. Think of an airplane, think of a sailboat. All of these things I'm asking you to think of randomly show up as an image, a pictorial image made of fragments of light that show up out in front of you somewhere in your holographic dashboard. So it's a storage and retrieval system. and it will retrieve anything that you ask for. And this is one of the ways that the CIA, the United States Army, has figured out how the consciousness of our mind and body work together. But the point is, the closer those images are, the closer those holographic imprints are to our nervous system, our spine and brain, the more intense they are interpreted as. Case in point, I had a guest over at my house recently, and we were in my swimming pool in the backyard. It's really hot out here in Northeast Oklahoma. And she has severe, like, arachnophobia, like just terrified of spiders. And we're all in the pool and we're on these floaties. We're all on these tubes and we're just kind of floating around. And there was a cobweb on, I have a canvas that goes over the top of my pool so we can be out there completely shielded from the sun. Not completely, but mostly, that I built and put up there myself. And there was a cobweb at the top, and I think my son mentioned that, and she started to kind of panic, even though it was a really faint, weak cobweb with no visible spider. And I pointed out to her that she's not scared of the cobweb, she's not scared of spiders, she's not even scared of the name spider. What she's scared of is a huge picture, an imprint, a subconscious holographical fractal image that pops up in front side of her mind, just as I was asking you to reveal those details when I was asking you about a sailboat and piece of pie and all that. She has an enormous picture of a very colored, vivid spider too close to her nervous system. And the minute she hears spider, the minute she hears arachnophobia or even cobweb, it activates, and her nervous system interprets it as a solid object right there in front of her. So what I did was I told her how to manipulate that data, and suddenly she changed that data in a way that's kind of laid out in my book, a holographic deletion. And she manipulated that data, and suddenly she could not bring the fear of spiders back. In fact, later that day, a tiny little spider landed on her arm, and she just kind of observed it, curious, carefully, just watching this little tiny spider on her arm. Now, that's how quickly phobias can be dealt with correctly when you understand the coding system of how your neurology operates and works and retrieves information and gives meaning to it. And that was all done by working with her subconscious mind. Again, a part of us, not one hint of this data was ever revealed to me during my entire career in functional medicine and energy work and through the years of becoming a chiropractor. So some of you might be listening to this, and maybe some of you have read my book. I would highly encourage you to get it because it'll introduce this in more depth and give you step-by-step processes on how to access that and interface with those kind of things that might be problems. Now, you may be not have a phobia, but I can guarantee you every problem you have, nearly every problem you have, is interfaced in some kind of image out in front of you that your nervous system is deriving meaning to and from. And it's doing all the things that I had mentioned earlier, triggering your reticular activating system, activating your HPA axis, overriding your entire hub of what governs your entire nervous system, and creating a lot of stress and ongoing commotion inside your body. And it's as easy to access that data and change it as it was for me to change it in this guests at our house. So in doing this, one of the questions that comes up is, what's the most effective method? What's the most effective method for going in and clearing out this stuff that, what's the most effective trauma method? Because I've studied so many, and many options exist, and I've tried a majority of them. And some of them work well, some of them work temporarily, some of them require an immense amount of work and energy for not a lot of payout. So you're putting a tremendous amount of work and energy into something, a system perhaps that you're trying to clear out some trauma. You're trying to clear out these things that don't are not serving you and not getting a lot of results. So I am not here to, like, banish anyone or um, bash any type of method. I've seen deficiencies in all the ones I've tried though. And it's because they don't address the holographic imprints correctly. So my purpose is not to just sit here and bash others, but it is to teach others, people, especially degreed professionals, professionals that are doctors and um, psychologists, psychiatrists, people that are wanting to know how to heal others. Know, and when I say heal others, man, we use that term so much, but most of the time we are masking symptoms. Even if we're giving them herbs, even if we're giving them, a lot of nutrient dense supplements and things like that, if their nervous system is overactive because of these holographic imprints, constantly triggering that HPA axis, we're still doing surface level work. And people resonate with that. They understand that. I mean, I had three patients this week alone, three patients referred to me from other doctors, and each one of these three said this: the pills only take me so far. I'm so tired of taking, 25, 30 supplements a day, 50 supplements a day sometimes. 50 supplements a day, only getting them so far. And they're hearing that they're getting to the root. They're hearing that these things are going to heal them. The only thing that can heal you is your mind. Period. End of story. It's been shown over and over and over again. So my purpose is to teach professionals what has helped me solve that complete mayhem completely. What has helped me neutralize that chaos? What has helped me completely get rid of all the fragments that were once in me and show people how I did it and how they heal themselves using the mind and the mind alone. So I reject nothing about these other methods, but what I do reject is you having your own imposed limitations preventing you from healing. So your biases, your things like that, your own imposed limitations are the only thing that I look to reject, not a person and not their particular modality. But I'm a firm believer in promoting what works. I'm a firm believer, and every client that sees me, the first thing I do is write out a big R and I say, it's all about results, folks. That's what we want is results. I'm about promoting what gets results. And I'm encouraging people to learn how to be themselves, okay? Learning how to really be themselves outside of the chaos, outside of the mayhem, outside of the trauma, outside of the imprints in front of them, these holographic imprints that are having a tremendous ordeal in their mind and body. And the reason why these images that I was describing, the reason why these images are problems, like this one for my guest that was here, this big imprint of a spider, is the closer it is to the nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord is filled with superconductors. They're nodes on the spine, areas of dense neural tissue, and the brain itself is a tremendous um, superconductor of vast amounts of circuitry. I talked about the nervous system being the most sophisticated electrical system on the planet. And whenever you have electrical systems that are very complex and they have uh, electrical signals, electrical outlets, electrical beams that interact with each other on a perpendicular scale, they create what's called scalar waves. Scalar energy is nothing new. Scalar energy is basically the subatomic roots. Scalar energy is, you can call that chi, you can call it life force. Scalar energy is the very essence of everything from the subatomic field to actually massive um, galaxies. So the scalar waves are basically the origination of everything, and our brains are conductors of scalar energy. And whenever you have these circuits, these this complex neural circuits interacting and creating scalar waves. This is the actual thought energy. This is our thought forms that we generate when they leave our body, they leave our physical body, and uh, they interact with quantum matter. They interact with quantum possibilities, infinite possibilities within the quantum field. And when they're held with enough duration and enough intensity over a period of time, that quantum information starts to slow down and start to coagulate and coalesce, comes together and starts to form what we'd call matter into being our life experiences. So it depends on what our thoughts are coming out. That depends on how our experiences are going to show up in our life. And that's how we absolutely create our own reality. Now, earlier I said that this podcast was delayed a week because of my own circumstances and some things that have happened in my life that I would share with you on what happens when you start to change these internal imprints, when you start to clear out those holographic imprints that are the very backbone of what trauma is, and you clear them out correctly. I'm about 100 pages into my next book, and in this book, I tell a story of nearly a decade ago. I was on the way to get my family, and I was driving a white Nissan Armada, kind of like a Japanese Suburban, and I had my kids in it, and I had just picked my children up from my former spouse, and I was on the way to my home in Kansas City on Bond Street, lovely street, beautiful neighborhood. I had a beautiful house, and I'm on the way there. I'm excited. I got my kids. It's a wonderful spring day. Out of nowhere, a rock hits my windshield on the highway. No damage, no cracks, just a rock hits the windshield. And within that moment, something in me got triggered. Why? There was already internal chaos. There was mayhem I had carried my entire life. And although it wasn't obvious, it wasn't on the surface, that rock hitting the windshield brought all of that holographic information right up to the surface, and it expressed itself in a way that suddenly my body was very tense. My body was very tight. It's like I gripped the steering wheel just a little bit more. And without saying a word, without having any change in facial expressions towards my kids in the back, you could just feel the anger. You could just feel the tension suddenly build in that Nissan Armada. You could just feel it. And it went on for about a minute and a half before my wife, Tiffany, leaned into me and said, "Don't let this ruin the entire weekend with your kids." And of course, after that, it took me a while to kind of come out of that. I was at that moment, I was a level one conscious awareness, graduating into level two. And what that meant was I was starting to become aware that there was an inner mind. There was an inner part of me that it wasn't just two minds. There wasn't just two minds responsible for my life. There was my conscious mind and my subconscious mind. And I had started to get a handle on not becoming emotional involved in negative ideas. Now, the rock hit my windshield, I was triggered. All that not getting involved in emotional ideas just went out the window for a second because of the imprint of trauma. There was no response flexibility in me. There was no moment to pause. That was robbed from me during this, from the childhood trauma. And that's what happens when we react, when we just are quick tempered, hot tempered. A person that's hot tempered has no moment to pause and determine how they're going to react to a situation. They just react. That is a definite impact of negative impact of trauma in our neurology. And that was the example that happened to me. So when she whispered that to me, I kind of came to my senses. I kind of took some deep breaths, and I knew all about breath work. So I was sitting there breathing, and within a moment, it passed. The wound was still there, and you could poke the wound and it would hurt. And in this case, all it took to poke that wound was a rock hitting the windshield with no cracks in the windshield or anything else. Um, Contrast that to today, right now. Why the podcast was delayed a week is because this last Sunday, uh, we are in the same swimming pool with my family. I'm in the backyard of my house here in the Ozarks in Northeast Oklahoma. It's a hot Sunday evening out there with my family around 7:30, and my family and I are swimming, having a good time. And I get out of the pool. We all get out together and we're kind of walking into the house. And as I come around the corner of my house, my garage doors open and I have a beautiful dark red high country Tahoe and I see water pouring on it from the ceiling. So from the ceiling of my garage, all this water, gallons and gallons of water is just coming through my ceiling, coming through my lights, pouring over my garage and pouring right on top of my Tahoe and right on top of my Polaris. And in a moment, I kind of panic. I'm like, huh, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And I was just going to tell you right now, I study my field. I love my field. I'm one of the best in this field, but I'm not mechanically inclined. That means I could change a tire, but that's about it. If something happens, a plumbing incident, something goes wrong with my house or with my vehicle, I hire a professional to do it. I'm not your fix it guy. That's not me at all. And I freak out seeing this water. Okay. When I say freak out, it's not the same as being triggered. I had an experience, a human experience. And within 60 seconds, my brain is telling me whatever's going on, it's something that God is sending you. It's something the universe is giving you. It's maybe another test, an opportunity to grow. Maybe there's something that you're supposed to learn from this. That's exactly what my brain went to. And I run up to the well house to shut the water off. Tiffany runs upstairs, and what we find was a pressure switch went bad on our well house, and it went from 65 psi, our normal operating pressure on our house, to well over 120 psi. And the weak link in our house was upstairs under my sink in my bathroom near my office. One of the pipes to the cold water came undone, and that's where all that water was coming from. So my upstairs bathroom was flooded, coming through the garage. And as I shut the well water off, I backed the Tahoe out of the garage, got my Polaris out of the garage, went upstairs to Tiffany, and she was already shop vacuuming that water up because I had turned the water off. And about that time, my 15-year-old son, Jude, who was present the day that rock hit the Nissan Armada windshield, comes up to Tiffany and I. And again, this is about 6 minutes after after we had found out the water was coming through the ceiling. And he tells us, "Are you guys okay? You guys seem awfully cheerful. You guys seem awfully cheerful," were the words he said. And why? Because Tiffany and I did not have any holographic imprints going active. Our HPA axis was relaxed. The inner chaos and complete mayhem that had been a big part of my life was no longer there. And even this incident of having suddenly my roof flooding, my garage roof flooding and my office flooded, my bathroom flooded, was not setting me off to where my son could come up and tell me, "You guys seem awfully cheerful." And I, of course, turned to him and say, "Well, getting upset's not going to do anything about it. This happened for a reason, and we're going to take care of it. Everything's going to be fine." So that's kind of the message for today. Whenever some people say, "Get over it, the past is the past," um, it's not exactly that the past is the past, it's that the past is still inside of us. We carry these wounds with us, and they interact and they rear their ugly head occasionally. But thanks to some of these more advances that we have today, we can go in there and neutralize those. We can completely cancel out the holographic imprints. We can use our mind to heal us in miraculous ways. Whenever we get the part of our mind out of the way that doesn't know that's over, and we can have events like, you know, a rock hitting the windshield, triggering me into a state of frenzy, to suddenly my house flooding, and it not even batting an eyelash at the potential chaos and everything else entailed in this kind of event. So those are the things that can happen when you really go within and begin to heal those internal wounds.